He was the most powerful man in Europe. His throne stood in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, and thousands followed him. But the smell of Louis XIV could be sensed from meters away. Historians say, in his entire life, the Sun King bathed no more than 3 times, and never with soap. Hygiene to the nobility wasn't what we understand today. The body was a vessel, not for cleanliness, but for power, for ritual, for display. If you bathed with water, you were a peasant. If you masked rot with floral essences, you were elite. Kings bathed in wine, or milk, or herbal infusions, not for cleanliness, but symbolism. Water, they believed, was dangerous. Through it, demons could enter the body. Healers warned, a wet body made you vulnerable to plague, syphilis, seizures, especially if you opened your pores. A hot bath, suicide. Servants brought basins and cloths. Kings and queens wiped their faces, armpits, hands. The rest stayed as it was. The belief was, if clothing absorbed sweat, it protected the skin. If the body grew crusted with filth, your immunity was stronger. Sounds insane? Here's this. One English monarch ordered all castle windows sealed with wax to block drafts. He didn't bathe for 7 years. His nightshirt turned brown. They didn't wash it. It was called his second skin. And here's the key. This wasn't perversion. This was status. Soap at the time was made from ash, clay, animal fat. It was expensive, stank, and irritated the skin. Those who used it were seen as either poor or alchemists. The aristocracy chose something else, to perfume themselves, but not wash, to dip hands in wine, but never touch water. You know what one pope did before Mass? He rubbed his chest with fat from a human corpse, mixed with rose oil. Why? To repel illness and enhance inner light. Aristocratic magic or ritual madness? Now imagine yourself at Versailles. Everything shines. Gold, mirrors, statues. But the air, it's thick, spicy, sticky with perfume, sweat, grease, and rot. Every inch of skin hidden under fabric, because what lay beneath, no one should see. Not literally, not symbolically. So now the question, why would such wealthy, educated people refuse to be clean? And what if it was on purpose? Dirt doesn't smell, but a nobleman must. The more complex your scent, the higher your rank. In the royal courts of Europe, smell wasn't just a habit, it was a statement, a declaration of power, wealth, superiority. You were meant to be sensed before you entered the room, and long after you left it. The high nobility of the Middle Ages wrapped themselves in a literal fog of perfume. Didn't bathe? Then you compensated, but not with perfume as we know it, with concoctions made from fat, honey, herbs, tree resin, and sometimes rat brains. Yes, really. One 14th century French duke's inventory included perfume brewed from a creature that died on a new moon, boiled in rosemary oil. The perfumes were thick like oil. You didn't spray them, you rubbed them in, especially under the arms, the groin, behind the ears. Some ointments were made from animal dung, but not just any special dung. Donkey dung, for example, was believed to eliminate the smell of fear and ward off poverty. This isn't about filthy peasants trying to mask a stench. This is about kings, proud of their scent palette. Louis XIV, for instance, preferred blends of musk, amber, and rotting bark. His personal perfumer created a fragrance that mimicked the scent of a sunlit, decaying body. Why? Because according to the court chemist, this aroma inspires primal awe and reinforces the strength of the flesh. You heard right. The smell of decay was a sign of greatness. In the Hungarian court of Queen Elizabeth, skin was rubbed with tinctures of peacock blood and moldy bread. The result? A scent that, as contemporaries wrote, clung like death. Men rubbed their hands with garlic and frankincense wax. Women massaged their chests with fermented hay extract mixed with fossilized dung powder. Perfume was a weapon. It repelled the evil eye, healed the soul, aroused the body. One German duke was famous for rubbing his neck every day with horse blood and lily oil. Enemies refused to come within 5 steps of him. And why do you think the nobility wore so many ruffles and heavy fabrics? To absorb, yes, exactly. To absorb, to trap, to hold scent for weeks, months, even years. Clothing carried personal power. It was a scent archive, a history you could smell. Now picture a feast, a grand hall, dozens of bodies, not one of them touched water in months. Each figure wrapped in layers of fragrance, decay, musk, and sweat. All of it, by candlelight, in sealed rooms, where the only window is blocked by a royal crest. This is how the elite smelled. This is how power smelled. And now the question, if you knew what the scent of greatness was made from, would you still wear the crown? An aristocrat's smile could cost a fortune, and not because it was white and perfect, quite the opposite. In the Middle Ages, noble teeth decayed, fast, fiercely, and foully. And that was considered beautiful. Brushing your teeth? That was for peasants. Real kings rubbed honey onto their gums to strengthen the breath and soften the aura of the mouth. French Princess Charlotte de Valois kept candied rose petals in a vial, which she used to wipe her tongue after meals, instead of a toothbrush. English dukes sucked on biscuits laced with vinegar and sandalwood to refine their breath. Sugar was a symbol of status. The more sweets you consumed, the richer you were. Rotten black teeth were proof of wealth. Court physicians claimed, decayed enamel attracts good spirits. One Spanish marquis wore the teeth of dead servants on a chain, swearing they protected his jaw from pain. And get this, Queen Elizabeth of Marshani, the very icon of royal elegance, had such destroyed teeth that she couldn't chew. Her staff mashed all her food into a paste, and her infamous smile, it was covered in layers of white powder to hide the stench. When a visiting diplomat once asked, "What is that smell?" the courtiers replied, "It's the fragrance of power." Teeth were pulled, with no anesthesia, using a lever-like tool. Sometimes parts of the jaw came out too. And the gaps? They were filled with the teeth of the poor. Yes, literally, corpse teeth. In England, there was even a term, Waterloo teeth, pulled from fallen soldiers, cleaned and implanted into the mouths of nobles. It was fashionable, it was expensive, and beyond that, to highlight the golden smile, teeth were painted with gilded leaf, black lacquer, or metallic powder. In some courts, having a dark mouth was considered refined. Bleeding gums were thought to be pure because blood was believed to refresh the breath. No rinsing, no paste, no dentist. But there was wine, spices, perfumes, and sweets. The sweeter, the better. One Milanese duke drank syrup made of sugar and orange peel, claiming it gave his voice clarity and made his tongue caress the truth more sweetly. Have you ever smelled a rotting tooth? Now imagine that, multiplied by 20. Now imagine that smell mixed with perfume, sweat, cologne, and bits of meat decaying between your teeth. Because no one cleaned it out, it just stayed there for weeks. And now, picture that person leaning close to you to whisper a secret or kiss your hand. That was the scent of power. That was how the Middle Ages smelled. And now the question, would you smile if your mouth became a grave? In grand portraits, they shine, fur, silk, velvet, gold. But look beneath the fabrics, and you'll smell the truth. Clothing in the Middle Ages wasn't just about status. It was a trap for the body and a tomb for hygiene. Clothes weren't washed at all for months, years, sometimes never, especially if it was a gift or a sacred garment. The older the cloak, the greater its spiritual value. Water could ruin it, so water was avoided. Stains, that was history. Odor, a privilege. There was no underwear, just a shift, and not always. Clothing was worn directly on top of sweat, filth, food stains, and bodily fluids. The body beneath was said to ripen, absorb, gain atmosphere. French chronicles mention a duchess's dress worn continuously for 7 years. It became so stiff with sweat and grease that it could stand on its own. Think it was hot? It was. And yes, it bred lice, fleas, ticks. No one fought them. On the contrary, parasites were seen as noble companions. Spanish Infanta Elena named her lice and wore them as a sign of living skin. A Scandinavian prince forbade anyone from disturbing his royal pets, fearing it would upset his spiritual harmony. Corsets and coats were laced so tightly the body couldn't breathe. Beneath them, sores, abrasions, ulcers, especially for women, under their dresses, damp layers soaked with sweat. Some ladies placed lavender and mercury sachets under their arms to soothe the skin. Sometimes they caused burns and swelling. Removing clothing was discouraged, not at night, not in heat, not even when ill, especially not when ill. It was believed that if air touched the body, a demon could enter. Physicians advised, cover the skin in fabric soaked in your own history. Do you get it? Filth became protection. Clothing didn't just carry scent, it carried ritual. After a hunt, blood. After a banquet, grease and sauce. After intimacy, everything else. Robes and gowns became diaries of the flesh. They remembered. The aristocracy celebrated it. Queen Anna of Bavaria kept her wedding dress, stained with blood and wine, until her death. It hung in her bedroom, as a symbol. Servants pressed the garments, but never washed them. They freshened the outside, powdered it, sprinkled vinegar, sometimes perfumed it, but they never touched the inside. That side was personal. Now picture a ball, a dense crowd, wrapped in costumes soaked in months, sometimes years, of sweat, grease, pain, and carnal memory. And all of it beneath crystal chandeliers, to music, to applause. And now the question, could you wear your story if it reeked? Imagine a world where water isn't purification, but a threat, where touching cleanliness could cost you your soul. In the Middle Ages, for the nobility, this wasn't a metaphor, it was doctrine. The church declared water dangerous. It was believed to open the body, making it vulnerable to evil spirits. Monks preached, "He who washes the flesh exposes the soul." Washing the body was seen as an act of pride. The flesh was meant to suffer, to rot, to stink, as proof of humility. Medieval monasteries, where the noble class often originated, taught baths were a pagan luxury. Christians should wipe away sin with prayer, not cloth. Water was the same element God used for the Great Flood. Water was dangerous, especially for women. According to church texts, the female body absorbed evil through the pores. A hot bath unleashed lust and released demons. Now listen carefully. Women were forbidden from washing after childbirth. Their bodies were bound tightly in cloth, covered in ash, and ordered to wear the same garment until the bleeding stopped on its own. The church believed water could wash away a blessing. Only after 40 days during a purification ritual could a woman approach a wash basin. Before death, the same rule. Washing the dying was considered sinful. The body had to pass into the next world in the same state it endured its final days. Dirty, wounded, real, especially for the nobility. Blood on the legs on a mark of suffering. Pus under the nails, a sign of pain overcome. You think this was just in villages? No. Popes, bishops, kings, all lived by these rules. Pope Clement V once banned plumbing in his palace to avoid unholy contact, and King Francis III proudly claimed he had never bathed. His quote entered the chronicles, "Cleanliness is the refuge of the idle." Then there was the idea of natural blessing. Dirt on the skin was proof that God had granted you sweat. And sweat was a gift, from labor, from faith, from endurance. So it shouldn't be washed away. On the contrary, it should be preserved as a witness to virtue. You might say, but what about Roman baths, ancient spas? Exactly. That's why they were condemned. Anything resembling antiquity was seen as sinful. Baths meant decadence. Water was a slippery slope into carnality. Aristocrats installed dry fountains in their gardens for beauty, but not a drop was to touch their skin. Prayers were recited before wiping oneself with a cloth. Servants wore gloves so they wouldn't touch their lord's sacred flesh. Some castles even had special anti-bathing rooms, where the body was dusted with ash, not cleansed. A symbolic cleansing, while physically intensifying the stench. Now imagine, you're a prince, you're ill, you're bleeding, you're burning with fever. And the physician says, immerse yourself in a bath of herbs, and you'll recover. But a monk stands beside him and whispers, he who washes the flesh endangers the soul. What do you choose? The marble staircase leading to the Duchess's chambers gleams. Servants carry trays of wine. Music drifts up from below. Everything is luxurious. Everything is refined. But the smell, heavy, warm, pungent. Because behind the curtain in the corner, the Duchess just relieved herself. Right on the floor. Medieval nobility didn't go to the bathroom in the way we understand it. There simply weren't such places. There were chamber pots, in bedrooms, corridors, alcoves. There were throne-like chairs with cutouts and leather pouches. There were open balconies where waste poured straight into the courtyard. And all of this wasn't just acceptable, it was respectable. Why? Because relieving oneself publicly was a sign of status. The less you hid your body, the higher your rank. An Austrian countess once received guests while seated on a velvet-lined porcelain pot. Conversation flowed, wine poured, the servant stood silently, and removed the waste without interrupting the dialogue. Think this was rare? Not at all. French King Henry IV was famous for relieving himself directly into the fireplace during receptions. One of his ministers once remarked, "The smell of the king is the smell of France itself." Aristocratic men often relieved themselves in the castle corridors between stone pillars. Women, right in their chambers, no screens. Sometimes, directly on the floor, hidden by skirts. Then came ash, then grass, then perfume. Picture a royal ball, under heavy gowns, clay vessels, some with silver lids. Court ladies trained to empty them effortlessly while standing. One Italian duke even hosted a contest. Who could do it the quietest would win a ring. Now listen closely. Waste wasn't just thrown away, it was collected, turned into ointments, perfumes, even medicine. Royal urine was considered healing. Servants brewed infusions with it. Jokes about royal essence weren't jokes. They were business. Some castles had convenience rooms, open balconies with stone holes looking out over moats or streets. Below them, passers-by, receiving divine offerings. And it was normal, no shame, no apology, just part of life. The most astonishing part? The servants. Their job was to be there, to collect, to carry, to wipe. Some even considered it an honor, especially if the pot belonged to someone of royal blood. You've heard the phrase from rags to riches? In the Middle Ages, it was literal. And now the question, if even the toilet becomes a throne, where does the human end and the idol begin? This wasn't a mistake, not savagery, not the result of an ignorant age. Everything you've learned over these 6 parts wasn't an accident. It was a system, structured, deliberate, ritualized, where filth meant power and cleanliness, submission. The less you bathe, the greater the distance between you and everyone else. Smell, parasites, rot, stench, excrement, not signs of poverty, but proof of exceptionality. Because only a truly powerful person could afford to be so physical and still rule. You didn't touch water because you didn't need to. You didn't wash because your flesh was above law. You didn't hide your excretions because you weren't like the rest. The commoners bathed in rivers. The aristocrat sat in silk in his own stench and received subjects. Kings didn't just live in this, they cultivated it. They turned it into a symbol of power. The scent of a noble man was meant to inspire obedience. The filth on a lady's skin was no accident. One French duke ordered his feet rubbed with dirt from a dog kennel, claiming it gave the body the scent of superiority. In 16th century France, noble boys practiced a rite of first blood. They wouldn't bathe until their first duel. Sweat, grime, blood, fear, all soaked into the fabric of their clothes, into their skin, became part of who they were. They collected life on their bodies and forbade anyone from washing it off. Even architecture echoed this. Toilets next to bedrooms, closed plumbing, curtained windows, no breeze, no freshness, only the smell of history. In Spain, there was an official court title, Maestro del Olor Real, Master of the Royal Scent. This man crafted the king's aura from human urine, rotted lavender, resin, and sweat. And yes, this went on for centuries, not by accident, by choice. Because in the Middle Ages, cleanliness meant vulnerability. To wash your clothes was to erase your story. To wash off sweat was to lose your spirit. To hide your scent was to forget who you were. The aristocracy didn't want to be new every day. They wanted to be eternal. You thought filth was a sign of decay? In this world, filth was a crown, and only one class had the right to wear it. Now think, what if this isn't just about the Middle Ages? What if, in a different form, it still exists today? And now the final question, would you choose to be clean or above the rules?